Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by robotic process automation pioneer Blue Prism. Digital transformation has the potential to reshape the way companies service their customers, engage their employees, and manage their operations. Whether you're looking to develop strategies, tactics, and best practices to positively impact the future of work, or you're curious to learn how other companies have successfully navigated their digital transformation programs, then this podcast is for you. We're here to help you transform now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brad Hairston with Blue Prism. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. Today, I'm happy to have as my guest, Michael Heric, a partner with Bain Company, who is a returning guest to the podcast. Michael and I will be discussing whether companies are acting aggressively enough in their adoption of automation and other emerging technologies. Michael, welcome back to the podcast. And please take a second to reintroduce yourself to our listeners.
Thanks, Brad. My name is Michael Heric, and I'm a senior partner with Bain. I've been with Bain for 20 years, and I lead our automation capabilities for Bain globally. In this role, we help clients with their automation journey from identifying the right automation opportunities and setting their strategy and roadmap through execution. Great to be here, Brad.
Excellent. Glad to have you. Michael, the last time we had you on our podcast, which I think was almost 2 years ago, believe it or not, we discussed your views on how companies should optimize the value of a digital workforce. Today, we're going to focus on another aspect. I'd like to get your perspective on the pace at which companies are moving in their intelligent automation journey. So let me ask you here right off the bat, are companies moving quickly enough, in your opinion?
I think it really depends on the company and industry, to be honest. I think some are moving fairly quickly, and it depends on where. So, for example, within financial services, I think many financial institutions are moving very quickly to digital channels and automating the customer experience, while I think others are moving, more slowly, both companies within an industry and across the industry as well. So I think it really depends. But I think overall, I'd like to see us move much more quickly.
And what do you think are the key things that are holding them back?
I think it's a few things. I think first is automation is more about people really than technology. And what I mean by that is automating processes or automating the customer experience is really about transforming your business processes, transforming the ways that you work, transforming the ways that you interact with your customers. That's really about managing a change program, both internally as well as with others, working with your customers and so forth. It's hard work. And I think that's why you see many automation projects fail. In fact, the failure rate is, quite high, as much as 50% or more.
Michael, do you believe most of the automation centers of excellence that are in place today, are they well positioned to help grow the automation pipeline?
When you're thinking about an automation center of excellence, I think there are several that are very effective out there that have achieved a great deal of results. But I just think for companies to be successful, one center of excellence isn't going to get the full results that many are looking for. And I think that's why, for example, within automation, many companies had a model where the center of excellence, they'd pull together lots of different automation ideas and opportunities centrally. They would manage those opportunities and help execute upon them. And I think that's good from a governance standpoint, making sure that the right things are done. But at the same time, the level of results that many companies need to achieve through automation, it's tough for one center of excellence to make it happen. That's why, for example, I think you see many centers of excellence looking for opportunities to really democratize access to automation, right? Through citizen development programs, as an example. Automation can't be driven just by a center of excellence. It's got to be both, top down, and top down isn't just the COE or the center of excellence, but also, senior management, whether that's the CEO, the C-suite, functional leaders, but it also needs to be bottom up as well, grassroots from people working day to day in their jobs and finding ways to automate. So I think it takes more than just a center of excellence to really achieve the goals that many companies have around their automation programs.
Aside from the citizen development aspect of intelligent automation, when a company is building a COE, Where do you think that should be positioned within the organization? I think we find most companies, regardless of where the automation program begins, they're going to put that COE somewhere within IT. I'm curious if you think that's the best place.
I do think the trend is for putting centers of excellence more in IT right now. And there's good reason for that, right? You do need IT's involvement and collaboration. It is important that you're not trading one problem for another, which is a lot of sort of siloed automation programs with sort of questionable results, security, and all these different things as well. I think the trend is to move it within IT. I do think that you get the best automation results when centers of excellence are closely connected to the business, whether that's with functions or in a shared services organization or what have you. I do worry a little bit that just having automation centers of excellence within IT, for example, and making this another responsibility of IT alone, you're limiting the future effectiveness of automation. So I think I'm less concerned about where the Automation Center of Excellence reports and more concerned about how you think about governing automation programs overall. And what's the role of IT? What's the role of the business? How do all these other elements come into play, from sponsorship all the way through incentives and funding for automation programs? If all these things don't work together, then it doesn't really matter where the COE reports.
Let's stay parked on IT for just a second. I know that Bain advises a lot of CIOs. So I want to ask you, what are you advising IT to do to help spur on more activity around intelligent automation? Is there something that comes to mind that you could share with us?
That's a great question, Brad. I think for CIOs, when it comes to automation, I do think they're thinking about all the right issues where we need more common standards and governance and think about the impact on architecture and things like that. But I do think that it is important to think about, there's a reason why a lot of these automation projects started as grassroots effort within the business, right? Within shared services organizations, for example, with RPA or other forms of automation. And that's because for some companies, the IT organization wasn't either the most responsive or fast enough to meet the needs of the business, given the rapidly changing business conditions. So I do think as IT takes more ownership of automation, how do you not repeat that? How do you make sure that the business feels like, even though the IT is taking over automation, the relationship between IT and the business around automation is going to feel different. And so I think it's really around that business partnering and how that actually works with the business. Otherwise, I do think whether it's RPA or another form of automation technology, there'll be another technology tomorrow that will give the business what they need, and will be sort of, repeating the same movie here.
Yeah, that makes sense. A related question to this is, does it make sense to ever do another proof of concept for automation in a company? Or can we agree that we've moved past that? There's no need to prove out RPA, rather maybe start with a limited pilot or a proof of value. What are your thoughts on that?
Increasingly with our clients, we're moving away from doing proofs of concept. But quite frankly, many don't even want to do necessarily pilots. I think what we're moving towards is, let's take a business process, look at that business process end to end, and ask ourselves how automation can reinvent that process. Where are the right points to inject automation, and how can we fundamentally change that? So for example, if we have a process, say around client onboarding, how do we take the number of days to onboard a customer down by half, down by 80%? How do we make big leaps forward around these processes by using automation? Because I think historically, as we all know, many companies get stuck in terms of scaling automation because you're trying to build out a return on investment from automating every single small task in the chain. And so it takes a long time and just becomes very difficult to justify investments. And I think breaking that paradigm and moving towards what I just described is sort of, absolutely critical to scaling your automation program.
Right. Yep. Do you think the current staffing shortage, as well as the high turnover. We're in the great resignation, right? Is that truly driving company leaders like the CEO, like the CHRO, to reevaluate how work gets done, what roles look like? What should digital workers be doing versus human workers? Just to, in general, explore ways to automate as much as they can.
I think for CEOs, absolutely. I do think many operational leaders, for example, so not just the CEO, but their direct reports as well, are thinking about the role of automation. And what's interesting is when we've done some research around automation coming out of the pandemic, we've just recently wrapped up a study in the financial services industry. The biggest benefits around automation actually are not around cost savings, surprisingly. Some of them are more around enhancing the customer experience and other things like that. And so I do think for many, it's not just necessarily a lack of talent or a shortage of talent due to the great resignation. I think there's also an understanding that, for many of the problems within a company, we just continue to do many of these things manually. We need automation. If we're going to achieve our goals, automation is the only way to achieve some of them. I think for CHROs, I still think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of truly understanding the impact on automation on the workforce. And what I mean by that is not necessarily there's an automation program and there's an impact on a department and what do we do based upon that? But what is my workforce going to look like 5 years from now, for example? And
Right.
what is the impact of automation? And what skills are going to be impacted? And how do we make sure that we're taking care of the people that are impacted, especially in lower skilled work? And how do we do the right things to upskill people, find them new opportunities, whether within the company or outside of the company?
Mhm.
And I think CHROs are thinking about this and coming up with ideas, but I still think we're very much in the early stages.
Yeah. Are you seeing more CHROs get involved in the leadership of automation initiatives? Is that a trend?
What I've seen is CHROs being more involved about thinking about the implications of
Mhm.
it. I wouldn't say they're getting involved in the ground floor of
Right.
determining what are the right automation opportunities and so forth, but I am seeing increasing pull to get CHROs and the HR teams more involved earlier. But I think where CHROs can have the biggest impact is really driving this, discussion around the overall talent strategy and the role that automation is going to play. And I think that's where they can have the biggest impact as opposed to necessarily always getting involved in the day-to-day implications of each automation initiative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Michael, with regard to the work that Bain is doing in helping companies with developing shared services and looking at, business process outsourcing opportunities, do you see companies now exploring automation as maybe an alternative to offshoring their operations, whatever that may be? Is that something that's becoming more common?
Yes, absolutely. Companies are still looking at working, obviously, with outsourcing companies, but they want automation to be part of the equation in
Right.
terms of delivering that service. But they're also looking, to your point, at completely automating work as well, as opposed to just offshoring or nearshoring. I think part of it is, like I said, to improve the quality of the service. And I think also in many of these offshore locations, there's an increasing talent shortage there too. And so I think there's a role to play for offshoring, but I think it's going to be around higher value work as opposed to some of the work that could be automated.
Well, Michael, it was almost 2 years ago when we did our last podcast together, which was right before the pandemic set in. The last 2 years clearly have caused a lot of change and brought a whole new set of issues to the forefront. Based on all of that, what do you think are some of the biggest untapped opportunities for automation in companies today?
So I would say a few things. I think first is absolutely the customer experience in terms of the ways consumers want to buy goods and services. I think you're seeing, certain types of models where I think historically people saw an adoption curve that was going to be much longer. but now the pandemic really changed sort of customer buying behaviors. And so I do think the entire customer experience across many different industries, automation can play a role, as well as advanced analytics as well. So I think customer experience is one. I do think within support functions as well. So whether it's finance or HR, other areas where automation historically has gotten a great deal of adoption. Obviously, one of the first movers around RPA were areas like finance. But I think
Right.
in terms of really taking it to the next level, really thinking about making certain processes much more paperless and touchless. And I think you're going to see really a big step function in terms of what can be done with automation in many of these different support functions. So those are a couple areas I would say, but I think it's quite pervasive across
Mhm.
across the value chain, to be honest with you. And I just think it's higher value, more complex processes where automation can apply versus the simpler, easier tasks to automate, so to speak.
Sounds like automation that needs intelligent skills. Would you agree? More AI, more
Yeah,
machine learning, that type of thing.
totally. I mean, I do think we're also a big believer. We did some recent research in this area as well, as we do also believe in really democratizing access to automation, that you're going to see a lot of employees being empowered with automation tools to automate their own work. And that's going to feed up into other forms of automation. But I do think putting in the hands of regular employees the ability to automate their own work and really get the same to use more of these complex forms of automation in a much more democratized way. So we've always had a lot of this, like citizen development around Excel, as we all know.
Yep.
Microsoft Excel, one of the most popular tools, obviously, around citizen development. But in terms of, if you look at really the adoption around more advanced forms of automation, it's still relatively low. And so I
Mhm.
think that's where you're going to see some breakout opportunities. And I think that's going to drive a lot of demand upwards into these more advanced use cases, automating processes more end to end.
Right. So a final question for you. What industries do you think are poised to make a big move in the intelligent automation area?
That's a great question. When you think about automation, you typically hear the big early adopters like financial services, obviously, that uses a lot of automation, as I mentioned before. But if I thought about a few that might be poised to make, I think, bigger inroads around automation in 2022 and beyond, is one, I would say like healthcare insurance companies,
Mhm.
where I really think, a lot of pressure from the pandemic around doing this work more efficiently, big announcements by very large healthcare insurers around automation programs. So I really think that is one example, I think, of an industry where I think you're going
Mhm.
to see a lot of progress in the next couple of years around automation.
Okay. Michael, thank you so much for rejoining the podcast and being with us today. It's been great hearing your thoughts and your insights. I always enjoy talking with you. Thank you again and be well.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks for tuning in to Transform Now. For more insightful discussions on digital transformation and more, check out our podcast channel where you'll find all of our previous episodes. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player. And if you like what you heard, please leave us a review. For more information about digital transformation and the future of work, check out blueprism.com to learn how Blue Prism's digital workforce is enabling enterprise transformation now.